obviously there's a lot of properties in the city that are being bought up by these nonprofits.
Yes.
So talk to me about that. What are these nonprofits paying in lieu of taxes?
Yes. Only a few of the nonprofits pay in lieu of taxes. There's about a little over 2,000 nonprofits that own property in Erie, and maybe about 15 of them or so pay something voluntarily in lieu of taxes. We can't force anybody to make a payment in lieu of taxes. Some do it. Some also donate for various causes, so they're not really doing it in lieu of tax payment, but they may give us $100,000 to buy a couple police cars or something like that as well.
Talk to me about pilot programs. Who are paying these pilot programs, and kind of does it differentiate on how big your nonprofit is?
It doesn't really. Any nonprofit can enter into a pilot program, and pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes, PILOT. And so, for instance, St. Vincent's and Hammett both have paid a pilot for as long as I can remember, and they pay 50% of the tax they would pay if they were taxable. And those are pretty sizable amounts. We actually get just under $1 million in total payments in lieu of taxes. And then there are some other charities also that, as I mentioned earlier, donate for various causes. They're not technically making a pilot payment, but they are giving money to the city that we use then.
Are there some that pay these higher pilot programs just out of generosity or anything like that?
I think most of them that pay it are larger, to be honest, and they feel like they do use city services, whether it's police, fire, whatever, and they feel like they want to contribute, and we certainly appreciate that. Ideally, we'd like every nonprofit to pay a pilot. However, some nonprofits just can't afford it, and the work they're doing is important to help people in Erie. So we're never going to force anyone, but we'll always keep talking to them and hopefully encourage more to pay.
To lead into my next one is, as more nonprofits come to the city, I mean, it's great because they're doing things charitable for people, but that is taking away from different tax-paying areas.
Yes.
So what's your message to those nonprofits that continue to come in? Will there ever be a line where it's like, hey, we love what you're doing, but we're going to need some?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'd ever deny a nonprofit, but it's hard to imagine many new nonprofits that we don't already have that need to come into the city. We'll certainly, one of the things that's been going on also is existing nonprofits have begun to work together and can kind of consolidate. And when they're doing that, they obviously get larger, and those are the type of nonprofits we would talk to about maybe considering making a payment in lieu of taxes.
Do you have any that come on the top of your head, an example of that?
I guess I don't have a good example off the top of my head. If I think of one before we're done, I'll let you know.
Or
yes.
you can tell me later. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, this story came to light after, and I know that it raised questions even with people in our newsroom of when Gannon bought more property in the city. So what's your message to those, not only at Gannon per se, or any nonprofit,
Yes.
but to taxpayers who are concerned about this?
Well, Gannon, for instance, brings a lot of young adults into the city to go to college. But they also buy things at the stores. They contribute to the local economy. So I think people that would criticize a Gannon for not paying taxes neglect the big picture of the benefit we have for having those kids there. And hopefully we're going to get a lot of those kids that want to stay here. And if they work, they're going to pay income tax in the city. And if they stay here, they'll be paying property tax on a home, and they'll be paying income tax. So I think it's a little short-sighted to particularly look at a Gannon or a Mercyhurst, for instance, and say, hey, they're nonprofits, why aren't they paying something? They are doing a lot of good for the city, and they both, Mercyhurst also sponsors our 4th of July fireworks. I think that's about $30,000, and they give to other things as well. So I think they realize they're part of the community, and they want to contribute. And I guess I would never do anything to stop either of them from expanding.
And the other concern that even was raised to us by some people is just like, my property taxes are going up, but why can these people come in and buy more properties? So what's your message to that kind of, although that property tax increase was just in order to fit in the budget?
Yes.
What's your message to that?
Well, I guess, number one, every property a nonprofit buys doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to pay income tax. And some of Gannon's recent purchases, for instance, they purchased an apartment building at 6th and Sassafras on the north side of the street there. They still pay tax on that because people live there. They're paying rent to Gannon, and Gannon pays property tax on that. So also, most churches, of course, are tax exempt. However, the churches still pay tax on their rectory, where the pastor lives. So it's not quite as cut and dried as a lot of people think. And we are really hoping that by about the middle of this year, we'll get council to go along with accepting that $90 million payment from the Erie Water Authority. If we get that, we'll be able to pay our debt down. And I believe it'll be many, many years before there's any property tax in Erie if we're able to accomplish that, any increase in it.
And you hit on another big part, and there's so many. That was my first thing I noticed when I moved to Erie is how many churches
Yes,
are in this area.
yes.
So how is it for you to kind of not only see that they help the city as well, but what do they do in order to contribute in lieu of these
Yeah,
taxes?
well, I think you're going to a church, believing in God, believing in the good, in humanity, and how we can get that is all good. And I think we're much better because we have a lot of churches than we'd be without them. The fact that we may lose a little tax money on some of the property, that's not, honestly, that's not a big deal to me. A lot of, Erie has lost 40,000 people in Erie in the last 50 years or so. That has a huge impact on us, and that left a lot of properties vacant and blighted. And many times we don't know who owns them. Nobody's paying tax on those either, even though they're taxable. So I really believe if we work together long term, we're going to do really well.
Do you think the programs that you're hosting now through Kathy Rosnick and other ways of going to really knock down and figure out where that blighted property is, do you think that can help contribute?
I think that's going to be a huge contributor. We're working actually with Gannon now. Their students, they're not volunteering. They are going to get a minimal pay for doing this, but they're going to go to every neighborhood, look at every house, and they're going to, after they're trained, they're going to come back to us and report which houses are blighted. And then our code enforcement officers will go out and confirm what they have, because they're new to this, so we'll confirm it, and then we'll, for the first time, have a list of all blighted properties in Erie, and we can come up with a plan to attack that as well.
What's your message just to those nonprofits and everybody else who kind of contribute to this area?
Well, I certainly really appreciate everything the nonprofits do here in Erie. The work they're doing typically is not done by any for-profit company, and they're really helping the people of Erie. I certainly would ask them to consider if there's a way they can help the city financially, that we would welcome that. But again, as a nonprofit, they don't have to do that.
And then my final one is kind of, is there any of those nonprofits that really contribute in those pilot programs that kind of surprise you when looking at?
I guess it doesn't. Most of the ones we've had in there, honestly, have been contributing for years. We had very few additional nonprofits join that, but we're really happy with it, and we will continue, of course, to welcome any nonprofit that wants to pay a pilot to the city.